Hello and welcome everybody to the National Space Centre, and we're going to be joined very shortly by a very special guest and of course my fabulous co-host throughout this period, Sophie Allen from the National Space Academy. We are open today at the National Space Centre and it is half term in Leicester, so to everybody who's there at the National Space Centre, hello and welcome. I hope you're having a fabulous day, and for everybody that's joining us online, I know there's loads of schools and loads of people all over the UK, so hello and welcome. We have some questions that we're going to put to our guests, but let me introduce our fantastic guests. Of course, it is Tim Peake, UK ESA astronaut, and Sophie. Hello. Oh, Sophie, what are you reading?
I've just picked up this really fantastic. It's fascinating, but it's really good. I'm learning a lot of stuff I didn't already know about you, Tim. So.
I know I was a bit too honest in that book, I think. I'm going to regret that over the next few weeks, I'm sure, as people realise that just how clumsy I have been in my previous careers.
You need to change this though, Tim, because reading it just says soldier, pilot, parent, astronaut. There's a lot more in there, so I think you need to lengthen the front of the cover somewhat. But enough of that. You're having a fabulous week with your book. I see you've been everywhere this week, so a really busy time for you.
It is a busy time, yeah, but it's good. It's been great fun, and it's given me an excuse to kind of get out about and meet people again. Obviously, it's been a really strange year, so it's been quite nice to be out and about. And so now it's busy times, but I like being busy, so this is perfect.
Okay, and then I've got one more really important question for you. I saw that you posted on your Facebook page that your sons have put together their essential packs of everything that they need to survive. I've got some swaps of the cards, so if your son wants to swap some of the cards, the Lego cards, I've got swaps, okay? So that's the important bits over and done with. I thought I'd just get that in now while I could. So just let me know later if you've got any numbers you want to swap. But we have had hundreds of questions, Tim. I'm not kidding. We have been inundated by questions, so let's get this on the road and get going. And what we've done is we've tried to group the questions together so that we can get as many in as we possibly can, so huge thanks for doing this. But let's start off with question number one. So this one comes from year 5 at Clifton Green Primary School in York, class 2 at Blangar Primary School in South Wales. I hope I said that correctly. David Perrin and Adrian Phelan. So they would like to know, what has been your favourite, most challenging, most frightening and most surprising moments about being an astronaut? Just a few there to cover.
Oh gosh, God, that's a tricky one. So favourite, there are so many favourite moments about being an astronaut. If I had to pin it down to just one favourite moment, it was outside of the space station doing a spacewalk, and a few precious minutes where Tim Cooper and myself were at the far end of the space station waiting to repair the solar panel and being told by mission control just to hang out and wait for 10 minutes for the sun to go down, which is unheard of, absolutely unheard of. And those 10 minutes of floating there, you know, watching the sun go down and Earth going into shadow, and just seeing it, Earth change from day to night, and having the opportunity to float in space and look down and watch this was unbelievable. So definitely my favorite moment of the entire mission was those few minutes of the spacewalk. Most challenging, I think that was one as well. Most challenging, you know what, probably the most challenging moment is capturing a visiting cargo vehicle. We have to do that with the robotic arm, because some of these cargo vehicles will dock automatically, but many of them, such as SpaceX and Cygnus, we have to capture them using the space station's robotic arm. And it's surprisingly little automation in that process. It's really just down to the astronaut with 2 hand controllers, and it's a bit like flying a helicopter. You have to drive the robotic arm over this grappling pin and kind of capture it, and then dock it to the space station. And it's all down to you. And if you mess up, then the potential for doing a huge amount of damage to either the space station or the cargo vehicle is huge. So that is probably the most challenging, the most high pressure moment, because you could really mess things up. Most nerve-wracking was in there as well, wasn't it? Most nerve-wracking was definitely the docking, because we had an emergency and we had a failed automatic docking. So Yuri had to take manual control of the spacecraft and fly us in. And the first attempt there, he was blinded by the sun reflecting like a big mirror of the space station, and it really didn't go very well. And thankfully, he's such an experienced astronaut, he was able to kind of recognize this dangerous situation, back us back off into space again, line us up correctly, and get us back in for a third attempt at docking, which was successful. But when I look back and watch the videos of that docking, I mean, the first attempt, gosh, it was a near collision. So that was definitely, and we were very aware inside the spacecraft at the time, we were very aware that things were not going right. We'd had a number of emergencies on top of each other, and that's never a good scenario, whether you're flying as a test pilot or whether you're flying a spacecraft as an astronaut. It's always when you get those multiple emergencies on top of each other that things start going badly wrong. So that was favorite, most challenged, most nerve-wracking, and most surprising, wasn't it? Most surprising moment. Oh wow, I mean, there's so many surprises in terms of looking down at Earth from space, and that's your training just cannot prepare you for that, because all of our training is about trying to prepare us so well for every aspect, but you can't prepare for the view from space. So I think overall that has to be the most surprising moment, is just going to that cupola window and looking down at Earth. So I think that covers all of those, but that was a long list.
Yeah, no, we tried to get everything in together, but it was those highlight moments. We obviously watched every moment of your mission, and we can remember, or certainly I can. We sat with Anu Ojar, the director of the National Space Academy, who's brilliant at being able to explain exactly what's happening. And certainly that moment of capture where Yuri is so calm and knows exactly what he's doing, and making sure that you docked with the station. It was a fantastic moment to watch, and just shows the professional nature of the astronauts that you work with. I mean, it was brilliant. We really enjoyed your mission. Thank you, Tim. So let's move on. We've got another question. So this one is from Eva Taylor, age 10, Aurelia Gill, age 6, Adrian Robinson, and Hayley Jean. When did you decide to follow a career in the military, and when did you start thinking about becoming an astronaut?
Oh, good question. So my decision to follow a career in the military was actually quite early on, probably from the age of 14. And I joined the cadet force at school. We had a combined cadet force. And I joined the army section because, I don't know why really, I was just drawn to the army section more than the RAF. I just liked the things that the army section were doing, but of course the Royal Air Force section were flying, and I liked that too. So I was quite cheeky, because I went to my CCF master at one point and said, listen, I'm loving being in the army cadets and I don't want to change, but is there any chance I could do some flying with you guys at the weekend? And he was very understanding and said, of course. And so I was able to go along and have a couple of trips in gliders and the old Chipmunk, de Havilland Chipmunk tandem seater. And that was just wonderful. And for there, really, I think my heart was set on both being in the army and flying aircraft. And it seemed a very logical choice that the Army Air Corps was where you got to do that. So I guess I was very fortunate, because many of my peers were going through school life not really knowing what they wanted to do, which is absolutely fine, because you don't have to make up your mind at that point, and many people don't make up their mind until much later, and they went on to higher education. Whereas for me, I knew what I wanted to do from 14, and by the time I got to 18, I was all for just getting on with it. So that's why I left school. I had a year out before joining the army, going to Sandhurst, and thankfully becoming a pilot. So really, a very early age, because aviation and flying was my passion. But it wasn't until I was much older that I even considered becoming an astronaut. And that was when I was about 35, 36, and I was working as a test pilot. And that's when the European Space Agency started, muting that they were going to have a new selection process for a new corps of astronauts. And I realized that I was in the right time and the right age, the right qualifications. And what was fundamental was that was the first time that ESA had opened up the doors to the UK, because previously ESA hadn't run an astronaut selection. National agencies had individually selected their astronauts, but this was open to the UK. So thousands and thousands of people across the UK, for the first time ever, were able to apply to a European selection process. So that was incredible.
Brilliant, thank you. Loads of people asking the question, how do they follow in your footsteps there, Tim? So, Sophie, would you like to give any advice? Obviously, you teach a space engineering group, but are there any advice that you can give on careers, not only as an astronaut, but also the space industry as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, we'll tackle the astronaut question first. So I think one really important thing to point out is that you don't finish school and go straight on to being an astronaut. That's not the way that it works. Astronauts have to have a lot of life experience. They have to have a lot of knowledge they've built up through their career that they can base decision making and things like that on. So what is really common amongst all astronauts is that they've all had a different career first, and they've all excelled at that career. They've done something that they've loved, they've done something they've been willing to put the time into, and they've all done really, really well in that. So of course, maths, science, engineering, and those subjects are really important. Most current astronauts will come from an engineering, science, medicine, or military background. But we're also seeing, as things are going to hopefully start opening up with commercial space flight, that might start to change a little bit. And what we're going to be always looking for are, skilled individuals who are great team workers, who take opportunities when they're given them and ask for opportunities as well. Tim said there that he cheekily asked if he could go flying at the weekend, when he was in the cadets. And being the kind of person that takes the initiative is really important as well. So obviously, do look at your science and your maths and work as hard at that as you can. But really think about what it is that you would want to do as a job apart from astronaut, because that will come later on. And in terms of careers that you can do in the space industry in the UK, there are so many. The UK has a thriving industry with over 40,000 people at the moment employed directly in space activities. Everything from astronomers to engineers building Mars rovers to astrobiologists, which are basically professional alien hunters. They are looking at designing the experiments that we're going to send to other planets and moons in our solar systems to look for life. And even things like space artists. If you think about every time we see pictures of an exoplanet or a potential black hole in the distance, we've not imaged them directly. An artist has had to take on the scientific information and come up with those pictures. So there's a huge range of different careers that you can follow in the space industry. And the key thing is pick something that you're going to enjoy doing, that you're going to want to do every day. Do your very best at that. And then maybe when you're about 35, there'll be another astronaut selection process and you'll be able to apply for that.
I've gone past 35, so I don't think that I can do it now. Although maybe next year I'll give it a try, who knows. Thanks there, Sophie, that's brilliant. And I'm so glad that we mentioned space artists. We can't have a session online without mentioning space artists. It's a new career that we've discovered and we love, so thank you for that. Right, Tim, back to some more questions that were submitted in advance. So question number 3. So this is from Malak on Instagram, Helena age 10 and Theo age 4. How did you feel when you launched into space, and were you nervous?
That's a great question. I just getting rid of this image of Banksy going into space there as your space artist, which is wonderful. I hope he applies next year, or she, who knows who they are. So what did I feel like going into space? Great question. And I'll be completely honest here. Nerves are not actually at the forefront of your emotions when you're launching into space. It's far more about excitement and anticipation of this incredible event. And that's not to say that you have not had moments where you've thought about the fear and the risk that you're taking. And every astronaut should think very carefully about the risk that you're taking when you fly to space. But you have trained for so many hours in the Soyuz simulator. You are able to cope with any emergency that is within your power to do anything about. And quite frankly, the only thing that is left are those catastrophic elements that would be outside of your control. And, that's really not much point at that moment to worry about that. And so you have just spent so much of your life working towards this goal of getting to space. If anything, the only one thing that you're nervous about is not getting to space. if the launch is called off for any reason, or if your suit leak checks or the spacecraft leak checks fail and you don't make it. So at that point, it's just this anticipation of this incredible event. And once the engines light up, it's unbelievable. The noise, the power, the vibration, 9 million horsepower, lifting you off that launch pad, and it's quite a gentle acceleration. It's not kind of a slam in your back. It's a build up to about 4 Gs, but in a nice gentle acceleration. But the feeling of power, it's like sitting on top of something, and once it goes, you suddenly realize it's got way more power than you had ever imagined, and there is no way that you're controlling this thing. It's on its way, and it's going for 8 minutes and 48 seconds. It just keeps going. It keeps burning. You kind of leave your comfort zone way behind in terms of the speed that you're going. It's very hard to comprehend 25 times the speed of sound. Having flown in fighter jets, 1 times the speed of sound, we can understand, 1.5, even 2. But 25 times the speed of sound, that's remarkable.
No, absolutely. And every time I'm very lucky in my job, I get to speak to amazing individuals such as yourself and Helen Sharman. And we're very lucky. We have her launch couch from the Soyuz capsule. And she explains how long you sit there waiting and everything that goes in advance of that, and the excruciating pain and the discomfort that you go through. And then to have that 8 minutes at that kind of force on your body, it's just... it's not as glamorous as people would think, this astronaut malarkey, is it really? So and it's work, it's hard work. So let's talk about the hard work. So we've got question number 4. Jack, age 6, year 5 class in Bicester, and Cora, age 9, would like to know about what is the average day on the International Space Station. Did you play games? And what happens if somebody gets ill? And were you ill at all?
I wish we did get to play games. So there's not really an average day on the space station, because every day is very, very different in terms of what you're doing. But there is some structure to our day, and the structure is get up at about 6 o'clock, 6:30, have some breakfast, do your personal hygiene, which is simply a face wash and a shave with electrical razor next to the air return, so any stray whiskers get captured. Brush your teeth, and then off to a round the world tag up. So we start with talking to Houston Mission Control, then Huntsville, who manage our science payloads, that's in Alabama. And then we jump to Munich, where the European Space Agency talked to us about their plans for the day. Then over to Tokyo, Tsukuba, where we speak to the Japanese Space Agency, and then we bounce back to Moscow to speak to the Russian Space Agency. So it's a quick round-the-world tag-up of what's going on that day and things that might have changed overnight that we need to be aware of. Then we get to work, and we're working from 7:30 in the morning through to about 6 o'clock at night. I'd say about 60% of our time is spent on science activities, probably about 20-30% on maintenance activities, and the remainder are things such as exercise and conference. And so there's that kind of balance that goes on Monday through Friday. And in the evening, we'll have another round the world tag up, followed by preparation for the next day. So, I mean, that answers another question that often comes up, which is, do you often get bored in space? I mean, working on that schedule, how can you possibly get bored? It's crazy. But we're there to work. That's the whole point. We're there to work hard. And our time is the most precious resource on the space station. So we should be working hard. And then we do drop the tempo at the weekends, because it's impossible to work at that level of intensity and concentration and not make a mistake for 6 months without having a bit of time where you just drop the tempo. So Saturdays, we'll clean the space station. We'll do outreach activities in the afternoon. That's where I would do the videos and the Science Academy videos that Sophie would be talking about, I'm sure. And so we do all of that on a Saturday. And then Sundays is a bit of downtime to take photographs, call family, and then you can get an opportunity to relax. There's a keyboard up there. There's a guitar if you want to play music. You can go and watch a bit of television on your laptop if you want to, or read a book. And then you'll get yourself ready for Monday, where it all kicks off again.
And then run a marathon in the midst of it as well, and just do a few things like that. And did you get ill? And what does happen if anybody does get ill on the station?
Yes. Well, we thankfully nobody got seriously ill when I was on board the space station. Things that can happen, I think, breaks and burns and cuts are the highest risk because we're moving around quite rapidly in the space station and we're handling objects that, whilst they're weightless, they have mass and inertia. So if you get something heavy moving on the space station, it can be very hard to stop it because of its inertia and its momentum. And if you've got an arm or a leg caught, then you could easily have a break. So I think the other things we're most concerned about are breaks and cuts. Thankfully, that didn't happen. I did pick up an infection in space, and that can happen. We don't have viruses on board, and we shouldn't have viruses on board because we've gone through quarantine. But actually, I ended up getting a quite nasty urine infection, which I wrote about as well. And these things can happen. So you can get infections in space, but you shouldn't get viruses. And I guess the thing that we're most concerned about is somebody having a major incident. For example, maybe a cardiac incident following a spacewalk, perhaps, or following an exercise event, or appendicitis, something like that, which could require, medical intervention. So they're the things we're most cautious about in space, most nervous about.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, it really is a tell-it-all book, isn't it? Everything's in there. Yes, Sophie, Tim mentioned there the Astro Academy Principia. Would you like to just talk a little bit about what it was that the National Space Academy did from an educational point of view?
Yeah, definitely. So I have to say, actually, and I have to thank Tim for this and the UK Space Agency that drove this forward a lot as well. Tim did a huge amount of educational outreach from the International Space Station, and there were competitions run to design him meals and the opportunity to grow rocket from seeds that were flown in space and things like that. And we at the National Space Academy were given the opportunity to actually design a small package of experiments for Tim to take up to the International Space Station and conduct up there, because it's such a unique environment. You can do science and show scientific principles in orbit, in this microgravity floating environment that you just can't show properly here on Earth. So what we did, our Astro Academy Principia, we took 5 topics that are taught at GCSE and A-level that surround mechanics. So things like what happens when things collide with each other, what happens when you have things moving in a circle, what keeps things moving in a circle. And then we designed experiments that I would do here on Earth, and then Tim would repeat those experiments on the International Space Station. And it's looking at the differences between those experiments. So here you can see Tim's holding a ring, and he has a ball running around that ring. And you can see the effects of this reaction force, a force pushing back on the ring that changes the direction of that ball to keep it going in a circle, so much more clearly in space than you can here on Earth. And I particularly liked, Tim said he didn't really have much chance to play games up there, but he did get to play a bit of orbital pool there, trying to get our collision balls to crash into each other. There's one particularly good video on the website where one of the small impactors bounces off and goes for a bit of a wander around the International Space Station. So, it's a fantastic opportunity for us to take these experiments, explain the science behind them, and then we have put these together in both individual clips of the experiments, classroom lessons introduced by our director, Anu Ojar, and of course Tim narrating and explaining the science around what's happening up in space. So if you know any secondary school teachers, or if you're a GCSE or an A-level student, I do recommend that you check out astroacademy.org.uk, and you can see all of those resources and watch what we had a phenomenal experience filming and doing. And I have to say, coolest thing in my teaching at the moment is when I play the video and Tim is name checking me, and I get to say to my students, yeah, it's me. And I get much credibility from my students for that. So thank you, Tim.
You're welcome, Sophie.
Thank you for improving Sophie's call rating there. No, there's some great resources.
There were brilliant experiments to be involved in. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed doing them. So thank you very much, everybody on the ground who was helping with that.
Yeah, and those are absolutely free resources. You can go and have a look at that website. We'll put it up in the comments at the end, just in case you missed Sophie's brilliantly handwritten signage there. Thank you for that, Sophie. Let's get on. We've got question number 5. So Ellie Barnett, age 5, Debbie Sterling, and year 5 at St Martin's Primary School. They want to ask about the very important bit about eating and drinking in space. What was it like, and what did you want to eat when you returned to Earth?
Eating and drinking in space is brilliant because it's the only chance as an adult that you're really allowed to play with your food, or you get the opportunity to play with your food. And it's a lot of fun. I mean, everything is just so different because everything is floating. So firstly, you have to be able to Velcro everything to the table or the wall. So all of our food pouches and our drinks pouches have a small strip of Velcro on them, so we can just keep them from floating away. And our drink containers are foil packets with a straw, so that we can drink through a straw and then clip it to prevent any liquid from leaking out the top. And our food containers are a mixture. Some of it is things like soups and noodles, which can just be attached to the hot water dispenser and then rehydrated. Other food is irradiated and it's in foil pouches, so it's very much like camping food that we'll just warm up in an electrical food heater. And we also have a can heater as well, so some of the food is tinned. Now that tends to be heavier food, so we don't have as much tinned food on the space station. But I would say that probably the tinned food is probably the tastiest. I think that the canning process allows the food to retain a lot of its flavour still. But most of it's a bit bland. Don't go into space if you're a real foodie and you love your food, because you'll be bitterly disappointed. Lots of the salt content is removed because salt exacerbates our bone atrophy. So we're already going to be losing bone density in space, and we don't want to make that any worse by having too much salt. So we end up having to add things to try and spice up our food and make it a bit more flavoursome. We don't smell our food as much because we tend to have a bit of a blocked nose in space a lot of the time, because all of the fluid shifts up to our chest and our face, and that kind of puffy face look that astronauts have actually sort of blocks your nasal cavities a bit. And if you're not smelling food, that's part of the enjoyment of food on Earth, is the smell. So again, that kind of makes meal times a bit less appetizing. And again, the other thing is you feel full up much more quickly, because if you eat a small portion of food, it just doesn't sink to the bottom of your stomach. It kind of floats, and it tells your brain that you're full up when actually you've only had a small portion. So I ended up losing 5 kilograms in the first 5 weeks, purely because I wasn't eating enough really. And so I had to really almost force myself to eat more, which was good because there's plenty of ways to put on calories or taking calories in space. We have a great dessert drawer with things like maple muffin pancakes, rhubarb crumbles, chocolate pudding, really nice foods, nice desserts. So that's the one area where whilst we might not have salt in our other meals, we do have sugar in our desserts. So I managed to put the calories back on that way.
It sounds like there wasn't anything that you could miss, because it sounds like you had everything there in space for you to enjoy. We were very lucky. UK Space Agency gave us some of the tinned products that you had that were created by Heston Blumenthal. Particularly loved the bacon sarnie. That was our particular favourite, so thanks for that one. Okay, so moving on to question number 6. Lots of people are asking about this one in the comments as well. So Toby, age 5, Patrick on Twitter, and Wayne Mocroft would like to know, how did it feel to do a spacewalk, and do you get vertigo?
Spacewalking is crazy, really. When you think about what you're doing and the amount of exposure you feel and the risk that you're taking outside, I think we definitely as astronauts consider that as probably the highest risk activity. But it's also the most fun, I think, is where you really feel like you're pushing the boundaries and doing something quite extreme. And the reward, of course, is the view. It's the feeling, the liberating feeling of floating in a spacesuit and just being able to have no pressure on your body, no forces acting on your body, and just looking down through a thin visor at the Earth and then looking the other way at the universe. And it's I don't think anybody's able to fully process that. It's almost hard to put it into words, because you feel almost like it's a situation that humans weren't supposed to look at. You know, we weren't supposed to comprehend that, the enormity of what you're seeing. And at the same time, it's a very serene and calm experience. It's not like a free fall parachute jump. It's not that constant adrenaline buzz. There are moments when you have high adrenaline, when you're working outside and you know maybe something's going slightly wrong, or maybe you have a bit of vertigo. And suddenly you realize that your predicament. And speaking of which, vertigo doesn't really happen much on a spacewalk because you're used to being in weightlessness, and also when you're surrounded by structure, it feels quite comforting. I had a moment of vertigo when I was on a small pole that's a shortcut between the main truss of the space station and the airlock, and I was halfway along the pole, and I was in a hanging position, and I think it just made my brain for a few moments think, hang on a second, you're hanging from a pole in the middle of nowhere, therefore you must be about to fall if you fall off. And I looked down at my boots, and beneath my boots was 400 kilometers of space and then Australia. And so for a few seconds there, my brain just clicked into a feeling of vertigo, and I kind of laughed because it took me by surprise. And Chris Cassidy had said, if that happens, wiggle your toes and you'll relax the grip of your hands, and that worked, and it passed very quickly. But yeah, you do get some moments of vertigo outside on a spacewalk.
Wow, that's amazing. I like the idea that wiggling your toes solves the problem. That's brilliant. I missed a little bit out on that question because, Sophie, I see that you have a little bit of a prop behind you. Wayne wanted to ask about, when you were outside the station, did you see any evidence of micrometeorite impacts on the station? And Sophie might be able to help with a little bit of a show and tell there. But Tim, did you see anything like that?
Yes, you do. When we're moving around on our handrails, we have to be very careful because the handrails are made of quite soft aluminium alloy, and where they've been impacted with micrometeorites, there's small slivers of sharp metal, and we don't want to go sliding our gloves across that razor sharp metal with the risk of slicing a glove open, which could be catastrophic. Our spacesuits can actually handle a hole of up to 6 millimeters. We'll be able to survive that, and we've got about 30 minutes of reserve oxygen that would enable us to get back to the airlock. But any greater than 6 millimeters, and our spacesuits simply cannot maintain pressure inside. So regardless of how much oxygen we've got, we will lose pressure and die very, very quickly. So if you were to slice a glove open with a large hole, that would be catastrophic. So we're very careful when we're moving to check every handrail for micrometeoroid strikes and just check there's no razor sharp pieces of metal out there. But you do see evidence of it.
And what is it that you do have behind you there, Sophie?
So I'm really lucky here in my lab at the National Space Centre. We've got lots of cool bits of space kit around, and what I've got behind me, this shiny panel, is a panel from a mission called LDEF, the Long Duration Exposure Facility. So shortly before the Challenger shuttle disaster, this was launched, and it was originally designed to be in orbit for a few months to have a look and see what the impact of micrometeorite damage, space radiation, and various other space environment factors would be. It was supposed to be quite a short mission, but with the terrible tragedy of the Challenger space shuttle disaster, the shuttle program got grounded for a while, and so this actually ended up spending 6 years in orbit, being bombarded by micrometeorites, little flecks of metal or little bits of propellant left over from previous launches that, although really tiny because they're moving at tens of thousands of kilometers per hour, have about the same energy as a shotgun bullet, and so they can do an awful lot of damage as they impact things. So it's a bit hard to see on the screen there with camera resolutions and things, but actually this is peppered with little holes surrounded by little burn marks from where things about the size of a grain of sand have torn through it at high velocity.
Yeah, I think we've just published a blog about how busy it's getting in space and the amount of debris. I think it's one of the most worrying, and obviously the International Space Station has had to be moved to get out of the way of some of these larger pieces. So yeah, it's quite a frightening environment, I would imagine, Tim.
It is, and depressurization is by far and above the greatest threat to the space station, I think, more so than a fire or a toxic atmosphere. And it's an emergency that we train for. But yeah, we see evidence of that outside the space station, and that's amazing to see there, Sophie. And we're also aware that we have shielding on our pressurized modules, but that shielding will only protect us up to about 1 centimeter in diameter. And that's, as Sophie was saying, that's a huge piece of debris, considering the energy that it will have on impact. Anything more than that is going to be catastrophic for the space station. But we can't track everything using ground radar. Ground radar can only track kind of 5 centimeters and above. So there's this area, this gray area, where we're not tracking the debris, but we know it would do catastrophic damage to the space station if it were to impact. And that's a big concern to us. And so anything we can do to reduce the amount of debris is going to be beneficial for the future. And that's something we really must work hard at doing.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So question 7. Now, this is the big one. This is from everybody. So excuse me while I read off the list of people who asked this question in advance. But Laura Lozzie Hume, David Hayward, Ali Sutherland, Helen Rage 10, Georgina Gwynn, Grifton Kane and Rimali Bhattacharya all want to know, when are you going back to space? And if you were offered the opportunity to go back to the moon or Mars, would you go?
Well, if I knew, I would tell you, I promise. The good news is that the European Space Agency is very good at generating missions, and Luca and Alex in my class have already had their second mission, and Thomas Pesquet from France will fly next year on SpaceX, and Isa would like to fly all of my class twice. And we are actually one person larger now. Matthias Maurer from Germany has joined the shenanigans, and so we're now a class of 7, not 6. And so Matthias will get his first mission as well. So between now and 2024, hopefully there'll be a second mission for me. Would I go to the moon or Mars? Moon, absolutely. Gosh, that would be a dream mission for an astronaut. In terms of Mars, though, at the moment, Mars is going to be a 3-year mission. And when you weigh up the length of time away, when I've got 2 young boys, I think 3 years is too long for a parent to be willingly away from young boys. Once they've grown up, left home, gone to school, gone to university, absolutely. But I think Mars is probably for the next generation of astronauts. I think my era of astronauts will see us through the next few years, where we return to the moon and we start having permanent habitation modules on the surface of the moon, which is really exciting. Building a space station in lunar orbit, the Gateway. These are all incredible plans that are coming to fruition right now, and these modules, these spacecraft, the rockets to take us there are being built. So that's really exciting, and I think the next selection process for ESA astronauts will be the ones who will be lucky enough to see those first Mars missions.
Yeah, I mean, it is a fantastic time in space, certainly from our point of view. The moment that you were selected, the moment you had a mission and the moment you launched, the inspirational factor and what we've seen as the comeback from that of people, and certainly children, really wanting to know more, wanting to get engaged with science and engineering, it's been fantastic. And I think, you know, you look at Dragon Crew, you look at Artemis and all of these programs that are happening now and happening in the future, and they really are inspiring those next generations, which has to be a really positive thing. So thanks, Tim, and hopefully the moon maybe one day, but if not, we look forward to your next mission, certainly. So question 8 is from Pippa Brooks. How long did it take for your body to adjust fully after getting back to Earth?
That's a good question, and it happens in stages, really. I felt that I had fully recovered after 2 months, but my flight surgeon said 6 months. The medical establishment pretty much think it's a day for a day. So for every day you have in space takes about a day to recover. But the first 2 days are quite physically punishing in terms of how you feel. You've got a lot of vertigo, quite a lot of nausea, and your vestibular system is trying to work out what is going on. And that's not very pleasant. For some people, that lasts only a short time, as for some people it lasts a lot longer. I think I had a really easy time going into space. I didn't suffer from any problems at all, really. And I had a tougher time coming back from space. Some people have it the other way around. They get into space and they feel dreadful for the first week, but then they come back and they feel great within 24 hours. So everybody's different. But in terms of proper recovery, probably 6 months before my body was actually fully recovered. And some of the things that take the longest are small stabilizing muscles, our core strength. That's what we have to build up. Lower back muscles as well. These are the small muscles that we don't get to exercise in space very easily. It's easy to exercise your major muscle groups because we have an exercise device up there, a treadmill and a bike machine, but not the small stabilizing muscles. And of course, the other areas that need to recover are bone density. And the one thing we can't do much about is the radiation exposure that we get, and that will live with us forever. And we're getting better at protecting the crews with radiation shielding, and we need to do even more when we go outside Earth's magnetosphere and we go back to the moon and we go on to Mars.
Fantastic. Yes, we had Mike Foale joined us very shortly after he returned from a very lengthy mission, and he kept having to sit down quite often when he was doing talks, just purely because of the muscle wastage problems he had, and he had a lot of pain issues as well. So again, it's not all glamour, is it, this astronaut shenanigans, as you put it? Right, we're going to have some more questions that have been submitted in advance, but we've got some quite big subject matters coming up, so I'm going to just throw a quick one in here that's just been asked on Facebook. Just because I love it and because I think it's a funny one. But Michael would like to know, how do they serve tea in space? I mean, you couldn't get a much more British question, so how do they serve tea? Tea
in space, yeah. Well, tea in space, there's not many people, I think, who are more concerned about this than I was. And I spoke to the food producers at NASA who package all our food up, and they even packaged my favorite tea bags for me and asked how I would like it with a small amount of sugar. We don't have any milk in space, so it had to be creamer. But the way that we do it is we put it into these foil pouches, and then you can just add hot water from the hot water dispenser. It's not ideal because what you essentially have is a tea bag, creamer and sugar floating in a foil pouch that you drink through a straw. And to begin with, it's hot and it's weak. And then halfway through, it's about perfect. And then towards the end, it's cool and it's sucking on a tea bag. So you go through all these different phases to one pouch of tea. I enjoyed it. I had a pouch of tea every day. I woke up, had a cup of tea, and then with my breakfast. So it was nice to have, but it's not the ideal cup of tea.
I'm sorry, that's a crime against tea as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, no, I threw that question in because I loved seeing the pouch of the particular product that you asked for. It was a particular brand, but then it was Milk and Two, but it wasn't. It was the creamer. I think, yeah, it was quite amusing to see that was definitely picked up by the British press. But so thank you for that one. Question number 9. So from Elijah on Twitter, obviously you worked incredibly hard during, before and after your mission, but do you think that space will one day be a place of adventure and play?
Absolutely. I mean, I think space is already partly a place of adventure and play for the astronauts to get there as well. When we go up for a long mission, we do have time to, enjoy ourselves as well. And the exploration factor is a huge adventure. But I think, to get to the nuts and bolts of the question is, yes, space will eventually be open up to a much larger percentage of the population, and we will see space being used for recreation, space hotels in low Earth orbit. For people to just go and have this experience of seeing Earth from space, and to some extent that's what the national space agencies would like to happen. We're trying to commercialize the International Space Station and hand it over to commercial companies, because you can't afford to run a space station and run a deep space exploration program at the same time. So by handing over low Earth orbit to commercial companies, it frees up resources to be able to build the equipment that we need for returning to the moon and going on to Mars. So I think that is going to happen. It started already. We've seen companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin with ambitious plans for what they want to do both in low Earth orbit and beyond low Earth orbit as well. So I think it will become more and more a place for adventure and play.
Yeah, and big movies as well. We hear that Tom Cruise will be filming up in space. So, and again, that is slight adventure and play, but I'm sure that the financial package will ensure that real science can happen and that collaborative process of the International Space Station continues. So, I think that's a really positive thing. So I'm just going to throw a couple of fun ones in before we continue with the ones that were asked in advance. So 2 people have asked us a very similar question. So Martha, age 6, would like to know if you had a teddy with you when you went. And Angela said, were you able to take nostalgic things with you in your travels?
So yes to both of those. At the time, my 2 sons were 6 and 4, coming up to 7 and 4 as well, because one of my boys had a birthday whilst I was in space, and I took Meerkat, which was one of their favourite little cuddly toys. It was a tiny little meerkat. So that was my teddy in space, I guess. Was my boy's Meerkat, which flew with me. In fact, they didn't actually know it had flown with me until I had a video call one Sunday and floated in front of the camera. And my youngest wasn't too happy. It's like, oi, that's my Meerkat. What are you doing with that? So I did have a teddy with me. Did I have nostalgic things as well? Yes. It's really important, when you're doing something like that, to have things that remind you of friends and family. So I took some photographs with me that I could put up in my crew quarter, and I was up there for Christmas as well. And my wife had sent me this wonderful small calendar. But rather than being chocolates or anything for each day leading up to Christmas, it was letters. And she had asked my friends and family to write a letter. So every day I had a letter from somebody that was very close to me to read in the build up to Christmas. I thought it was a wonderfully thoughtful present for her to send up. And that obviously had to be done so many months in advance, and even flew up in advance on the cargo vehicle so that it was ready for me when I got on board the space station.
Oh, I think that's truly amazing. I think that's a lovely thing to take with you. Sophie, what would you take? What would be your item that you would want to take?
I would probably take my cuddly tardigrade with me. We do a lot of stuff on tardigrades here at the Space Academy. They are about the most hardcore little creatures in the world. So I would definitely be taking my cuddly tardigrade up with me to the International Space Station, and he'd get to go where some of his cousins had been before.
I was going to say, aren't there tardigrades on the moon? Or there are tardigrades in space, yes. Yeah.
Yes. There was a bit of an accident with the tardigrades on the moon, but yes, they are now on the moon.
Oh, hang on, Tim, did you have something to add?
No, I was fascinated by the tardigrades, yeah, which is great research. No, I was just nipping away at. We've been speaking a lot about drinking and stuff, and so I thought I would just get. This is a foil pouch, since I've been talking about it a lot, so people can see. There's a little bit of Velcro. We have Velcro with everything, of course, so we can stick it to the wall. And there's the straw with that clip where you would unclip something when you're having a drink, clipping it back in there.
Brilliant.
But the tardigrade. Well done, Sophie.
Yeah, you got to get the bears in. Yeah, I mean, I love the fact that obviously you had tea, and Samantha Cristoforetti, being the typical Italian, took coffee and made coffee perfect for in space. So and there's a pineapple drink as well. So you've got everything covered. Right. So moving on, question 10. So this is from Anastasia on Facebook. How do astronauts deal with emotional pressure and isolation while in space? And what do you think should be done to keep astronauts healthy and happy during more extended missions, such as a trip to Mars?
Yes, well, we do a lot of training that works on dealing with isolation and the kind of pressures we're going to feel. So we train, for example, in a cave for 7 days. We live underwater for 12 days. And all of these things give us lots of skills about working together as a team, all those interpersonal skills. But they're also about dealing with isolation. And in terms of the emotional training we have, or emotional preparation, I think a lot of that is also down to the individual. It's down to you and your families to discuss beforehand what you're going to do, to have the time to put plans in place, and to be mentally prepared for what's happening. And I think with everybody this year having gone through lockdown, everybody has a huge appreciation of what living in isolation is like, and being detached from loved ones, and the value of communication under those circumstances. We're in the fortunate position as astronauts to have all the time to prepare for that, because we know it's coming, and it's very important to actually address it head on, not to skirt around the issues, but to be really, actually sort of confront them and think, right, what do I need to do to put plans in place so that I can better cope with these circumstances. That's what we work on. In terms of the future, I think it's so important when you're in space to have some sort of connection with Earth and with home. There was a big difference between the US segments and the Russian segment. The Russian segment had posters up of just green trees and fields and crops. And it was amazing to go into the Russian segment when we would gather around the table on a Friday and have a meal together, and to be surrounded by these pictures of Earth. And it was such a boost to morale, and it's kind of that connectivity with nature, because so much of the space station is a very sterile environment with just white lighting. The atmosphere never changes. It's got an almost clinical smell. It's a laboratory, and you're really deprived of those feelings of nature. When I was running, I had an app on my tablet that actually had film of the Swiss mountains, the Italian Alps, the Scottish Highlands. And so I'd be running on the treadmill and actually running on this route through my favorite running routes on the Scottish Highlands, for example. And that was such, so good for mental health and morale as well. And I don't think you can appreciate that until you're in a remote, isolated environment. You really appreciate the value of what nature and what Earth means to us.
I think it's fascinating because obviously you're like a family on the station, because you're in this small space together, and this family meal together that you have in the Russian section. It sounds fantastic. I would assume that you've made lifelong friendships through your time in space.
You do, and we are a small core of global astronauts as well. There are probably 150 astronauts, probably less actually, in the world right now who are active, and so we all know each other. We all train together at various times, and we are all very close. At times your life will depend on your colleagues, and so that forges a very close bond, and it's a common experience that when we go through common experiences, that's what forges these friendships. So we are a very close family of astronauts.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, we've got a few questions coming in on the comments. So we've got two about sleeping in space. So Harrison, age 14, would like to know what time you go to sleep in space. And Jagdeep would like to know, do you find it hard to get to sleep? And do you count the stars?
That's great. What time? Well, you can go to sleep when you want. We have a schedule that kind of has us going to sleep at around 10 p.m. I probably was going to sleep between 10:30 and 11 and waking up at about 6. I found that you didn't need as much sleep in space as you need back here. 7 hours was absolutely plenty. But it is your choice. So if you're a night owl and you like to work a bit later into the night and get up as late as possible and go straight to work, you can do that within the remit of the schedule. Getting to sleep is tricky to begin with because you're floating, and you've been floating all day, and there are no triggers when you go back to your crew quarter. There are no triggers that tell your body that it's time to sleep, like putting your head against a pillow. We can switch the lights out, we can put earplugs in our ears. Essentially you're just floating there, kind of waiting to drop off. Once you get used to it though, it's a lovely night's sleep. It's no pressure points, no tossing and turning, no rolling around. It's a really good night's sleep, and perhaps that's why we need less of it when we're in space.
Yeah, at the National Space Centre we have a mock-up of the Columbus module, and we know it's not there, but we've made a sleeping quarters so that people get an understanding. And it's that idea of being velcroed in so that you don't float around. I was Helen talking about her time on Mia, and that sort of idea of just floating around and drifting around the space station during your sleep is quite unnerving. It's almost zombies because of the way that your bodies behave. But it's fascinating. Right, so I've got some more questions
one
coming in.
One of the practical jokes I heard about, because when sometimes the space station get busy, there's only 6 crew berths up there, but when a shuttle was docking, we've had up to 13 astronauts on board, and one astronaut who was just tied their sleeping bag loosely in the Columbus laboratory. And one crew member got up early and without waking up the astronaut, untied the sleeping bag and floated them down to the other end of the space station. So they woke up somewhere completely different to where they went to bed. But that's what I was talking about, having play in space. I think we do that already.
I love that idea. I mean, I read about the sort of the intermilitary fun that they had in the Apollo missions, because obviously it's sort of Army, Navy, and Air Force, and so they all had this sort of little bit of fun that they used to have with each other. It's nice to know that there is still fun to be had. So that's great to hear. Thanks for that. And I like this idea that it was a human floating as opposed to the Apollo 10 incident, which we won't go into. So sorry, Sophie, I had to go there. It's so bad, I know. Questions that we've got coming in. What is your proudest moment at ESA?
There have been many. I think it was a very proud moment when we were all selected, actually, to be stood there, because I realised it was an important, such an important moment for the UK to have an astronaut selected, and an important moment for ESA, because this was ESA's own selection process, and it was their own core of astronauts that they'd chosen on. And so I think that very first day in Paris back in 2009, when we were actually announced as the new core of astronauts, was probably one of the proudest, right at the very start, thinking this is it, this is the start of a great opportunity, not just for myself, but for the UK and for Europe, this new core of astronauts. So I would probably say that was.
Fantastic, thank you. Another question coming in. We've got Kesmat would like to know, do you miss the scent or smell of things from your life?
Yes, I do, and I don't have a very powerful sense of smell. I mean, I think some people, it's a bit like taste as well. Some people have a very, very strong sense of taste. And my sense of smell isn't hugely strong, but when I came out of that caving expedition after being down for 7 days, it was as if all of my senses were on overdrive. My vision, the contrast of the colours of the sky, the green of the trees, the smell of the moss on the ground, and the earth and the damp. And when you're deprived of your senses, and then suddenly they're reintroduced, it makes it really stand out. So I think that I do enjoy the smells, and I do enjoy the outdoors. I enjoy the feeling of weather and rain, and that's what I probably missed when I was in space the most. Was nothing changes, the atmosphere is the same, there's no weather up there, obviously, it's fixed lighting, and I was just dying to go for a run in the hills and have it rain on my face and just feel nature and feel the Earth's atmosphere.
I think it must be a bit of a sensory overload, that moment that the Soyuz hatch opens and there's all that clamouring of people to get you out. And obviously that landing, that doesn't look like an easy landing. It must be a massive impact on your body.
It's a huge impact, yes, and several astronauts have had minor injuries following that impact. And you're right, the first few moments, they're not as glamorous as people make out either. It's pretty uncomfortable in that Soyuz when you land. You've had an impact that's equivalent to a car crash. You're probably upside down, not feeling very well, because gravity is just now kicking in and you're starting to feel all the vertigo from the gravity. And then the hatch opens, and the first smells you get are not pleasant. It's of scorched capsule and burnt grass from the steppes of Kazakhstan. And then somebody drags you out, and it's really not until about 20 minutes later that you can kind of just start to enjoy the feeling of being back and to enjoy the senses, the smells of Earth.
Right, we've got time for one last question, and this one came in from our friends at RAF Fylingdales on Twitter, and they wanted to know, did you know that the North Yorkshire Moor-based radar tracked you while you were orbiting the Earth and docking with the International Space Station?
Absolutely, yeah, no, that's great. I really appreciate that. And I used to fly around there. I was based at Dishforth for a few years, flying Apache helicopters, and so we would fly in that area as well. So it's great to know that we were being looked after and tracked by Fylingdales.
Brilliant. Well, that's it. That's our hour. We've asked you lots of questions. We hope everybody that asked a question in advance, and the ones that we managed to get in during the session, are all very happy. I know I am. A huge thanks, Tim. I know that you're very busy, so spending this time with us is very much appreciated, and we very, very much look forward to your next mission. And thank you again to Sophie for joining me. Yes, she's going to go back to her book now. It's a good book, Sophie. I will be joined by Libby Jackson from the UK Space Agency in 2 weeks' time on the 4th of November. And Libby will be talking about the 20th anniversary of the International Space Station. So somebody you know there, Tim, is joining us next. So thank you very much for your time. And that's it. That's everything from the National Space Centre. Everybody who's there right now, thank you very much for visiting and supporting us. And everybody who's joined us online, we hope that you had your questions answered and you had a fabulous hour with Tim Peake. Thank you and stay safe.